Amani family, this is Ikemba. Welcome to another episode of We Charge Colonialism podcast and book club. Again, I'm Ikemba, a member of the Public Relations Committee of We Charge Colonialism, and we have peace, brother. Wanna-
How you doing, Kim?
All right, all right. Want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Frank Malbat. I'm chair for the Political Action Committee, and I'm glad we are back this morning again.
Indeed, indeed. And Tierney should be with us shortly. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I'm loving the outdoors, man. I'm loving the outdoors. Are you home right now? I can't hear it. You're on mute.
I said I am not home.
Okay.
I'm trying to position myself right.
Indeed, indeed. I'm glad to be back. I missed out last week, but today, it's business as usual. So we charge colonialism, and usually when we, there's the the Queen of Africa right there.
Sorry, guys, had to get my son breakfast. How y'all doing?
No doubt, we're doing all right.
Frank, we can't see your face.
Huh?
I can't see your face. Can you get some sunlight on you?
Okay, let me see. Hold on. Let me see. Let me find a place.
Yeah. You were good before. You got that extra melanin right now.
Oh, all right. So let me see. Let me go.
Looking through the knees right now, man.
Let me see.
Yeah, we got a great conversation.
Okay?
Yeah, we got some great topics that we're going to discuss today. Just to let everybody know, we are going into a new read. We're going to be reading from Class Struggle by Kwame Nkrumah. That's Class Struggle by Kwame Nkrumah, and we're starting with the introduction. So if you guys are, tuning in today, you'll be able to start this read with us, start this book with us. So excited about that. So we're going to start with the introduction and hopefully go into chapter 1 to get things started. But as usual, we always like to start off with our weekly roundup. So, Habari Ghani, what's the news? Frank, you want to start off?
Oh yeah, sure. The news, how they call it right now, is the end of the Europe 2020. That's the 2021. South have almost all the team in the world in Europe right now. They have at least 1 or 2 African on those teams. So the English player, they have more African players on the team, almost just like France. So the leader just ended between France, let's say not France, but between Italy and England. These African players did well. They played excellent football till the end of the game, where they have found out with Italy, and then independent shootout. And then it happened to be like the African player missed penalty, and that led to some kind of against those African players.
You're breaking up a little. And Frank, you can hear me? You're breaking up a little.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah,
your connection's in and out. Yeah, I can hear you better.
Yeah, I'm not ready home, so the internet I'm using, that's what causing the problem and stuff. So can you hear me clear now?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so there was a research flood, how they call it, insult and humiliation against these African players after the penalty shootout. And that goes to say is that racism against Black people, looking at it, is not going to go anytime soon. So we just saw recently the George Floyd issue, and particularly in England, where almost around the world, players were kneeling down and start thinking that it was going to be the end of racism and treatment against Black people, but that have not been the case. Even up to now, Black people are still being, how they call it, into those racist attitude and things. So that's the thing going on right now in England. So but the whole issue here is, I think some of the things that we need to learn from these things is that these African player, the fact that you're already playing for a big club team, I don't think there's a need to go and play for these racist team around the world. The solution to it is that I think we have to stick to our country and play for our country's national team. As long as you are already playing the big league club team, there's no need playing for these racist team. And think, go to Africa or go to the black nation and play for these country instead of playing for them. And that just go to say that was an act of, how they call it, how they call it, slavery, because you only recognize black people if they have done something good, and then you recognize to be part of your society, you recognize them to be an English person. But the day they didn't do anything or things did not go right with them in the office, that's the time you tell them to go back home. That's the time you tell them you look like a monkey, you look like a chimpanzee, and use all these kind of a slot against them or against us. That is wrong. And we African, we cannot depend on white supremacy or on this European thinking that we're going to do the right thing, and then we become part of their society. The day you go wrong, that's the time they associate you with Africa. And one example, one of the players in the English Premier League that I really enjoy doing this whole issue of kneeling down, he didn't kneel down. It was Wilfred Zaha, and he said there's no point of kneeling down, because at the end of the day, it's never going to stop racism against African people. So I'm not going to kneel down, proving that it's going to stop it. It's not going to stop it. And that's a typical example. And he's played for Africa, by the way, but he played for a team in England. It's called, called Crystal Palace. So during the whole incident of kneeling down, he did not kneel down. He said it's not necessary. It's not going to stop racism against black people. And I think this is what we need to do. We cannot wait for the white man to come in to talk for us. Like, we have to take things into our own hand and stop playing for these racist teams. We just saw that even in France. The only time a black people can be part of European society, you have to do something good. What happened in France when the French, when that African guy saved that little girl from on top of a building? That's the time they said they were going to give him a French citizenship, because he have done something good for his master. So as long as they keep doing these things to us and we keep going back there, it's like they still take you to be slave, and then they try to define our poor in an era that will never and always fit to us. So the solution here is African players, black players, stop playing for these racist countries.
Yeah, I unite with that. Not even just these racist countries, but these colonial countries. Like, if you look at these sports teams, I think like what's the word I'm looking for? But they represent like the nation. And so whether it's the United States, England, Italy, French, when you have these national teams, it is also a representation of nationalism. And so, when you were speaking, it had me thinking about the United States and the sister Gwen Berry, who was protesting, and she was met with all of this racist black backlash through the social media. And it's just an example of if you're not the model player or the model citizen, the country or these Europeans, they will quickly turn on you. Like, you have to fall in line. So any sort of protest against injustices or against colonialism, racism, all of these things that keep our people from being able to exercise any self-determination or independence, because that's what the protests and everything is for, right? Is met with resistance. So it's just an example, I think, of just the stance that the colonial power has. It manifests their true feelings at the end of the day.
I agree. And I think that you hit upon a real important point is that when it comes to, what do you want? Okay, here, take this. When it comes to sports teams, it really is it's a symbol of nationalism. Like you are representing this empire, and you can't really separate, to me as an African person, being on a team and also representing what that country represents. I personally always get irked. I get irked obviously in the context of the US, where you have African people who are disenfranchised yet making all this money for these multi-billion-dollar teams. And not just that, but having like people like in the audience who are cheering for their guy, like, but they would never cheer for you in real life. Like that always irks me. And I see the same dynamics inside of soccer. And that you see like these European empires that were literally built by colonialism, and you see these many times African players who, you know, they might have been like really good, and so they or they went to Europe for schooling, or, you know, but sometimes the thing that irritates me the most is where you'll have actual players who were playing on their national teams, like they're playing on a national team of Ghana or Nigeria, and you have the European teams who have more money and can offer you more. And like, let's say they play you in the World Cup and they notice that, oh, these like guys were really good from Ghana, these guys were really good from Sierra Leone. They will buy you off of your team, and the players just go because that's a better opportunity. So it's like multiple levels, I think, of just disrespect to African people, the way that these sports operate, but also a further manifestation of the colonial system. And again, consistently we see that the fan bases of, I think, any sport, honestly, the majority white fan bases harbor racism. And so I do think that there's this implicit thing happening where the people are doing similar things as we've seen in slavery, where you had, you know, you'd have enslaved people who were their owner would have them boxing and they're betting on them, or you had the like fights where like fight to the death. Like we've seen like these types of elements before, but unfortunately our people don't want to challenge them, I think, because one, I think some feel like the monetary benefit outweighs the psychological enslavement. And two, I think also that a lot of our people enjoy these sports also, and so we kind of like join in and don't want to challenge it. Like, and I think it also plays a role just like in the Black community. I feel like a lot of us, it becomes like an opium for us from our conditions, where, you know, I'll see some people never have anything to say political, but they have opinion of who's going to win, you know, this sport, that sport, Super Bowl, or you know, basketball, whatever. So, you know, I think there's multiple issues when it comes to sports and how it relates to African people.
You hear me? Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to add to a comment that somebody wrote there, that the players, he called Sawyer. He said the player were not kneeling down to stop racism, but they were kneeling down for people to recognize racism, to look into it. I don't think that's what they were kneeling down for. We are not kneeling down. We are not advocating. We are not asking for people to look into racism, no. We were kneeling down for racism to stop. That's what we are kneeling down for, because we want for racism to stop. So are you telling me that you are not in favor of racism to stop, but we are bringing these awareness and things for people to look into it? We already know racism exists century upon centuries and generation upon generation. So we are not here to call to attention for people to know that, oh, racism exists, for people to look at it. They know racism exists. And that's why we are talking. That's why we are kneeling. And that's why we are doing everything possible for it to stop. And that's why we are kneeling down for. So we are not here to kneel down to tell the world that, you know, this is racism. We want you guys to look into it. I mean, when are they going to look into it? So it has been recognized long time. And that's why even when they're playing sport, people kneel down. And then you see a flashcard all around, stop racism. So what is the point of you putting flashcard all around saying that stop racism? Racism is not right. So we want to stop. We are not advocating for people to recognize it or for people to look into it. What? In fact, racism shouldn't even be a policy for people to go sit down and debate over it. To say we want to pass, you know, a law for people not to, you know, do any racism against another race and thing. It's not even a policy. It's not even something to even discuss or to even debate over. It needs to stop.
Right on. Most definitely. I think that is, you know, I think you have both of of those things happening at the same time, right? It's about bringing awareness and to stop it. It's not just like, oh, recognize this is happening, but it is not, I think, to bring recognition to us, because we know as people who suffer from colonialism and racism, we know that it's happening. But it's more so to let them know. It's speaking to their conscience. It's sort of like, during the civil rights movement, with the protests and everything that was taking place, and the marching that was taking place. It was to get white people to recognize, the federal government to recognize, hey, y'all need to do something, because we know what's going on, right? Go ahead.
Right down on time, but speaking realistically, like, because by now, we've read history, see how these things work. Do we really think that there's anything revolutionary about kneeling while still playing? Like, if we're being really honest, if we're being honest, the most revolutionary stance would be we're not playing.
Yeah, that's what we really should be talking about, right? So the conversation definitely is. But I would say, like, the part that they all play as far as raising the consciousness of people to do something, I think is vital to the movement. But as far as the answer to the problem, like, we have to go a step further. So so I never want to dismiss those actions, but I think, like, they are not the answer to what it is that we need, the answer to what we're trying to achieve. But yeah, we can segue into you, Tanny. I know we spent a lot of time on.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about protests in South Africa, which have only intensified. So if you don't know, they originally started because former President Jacob Zuma, he's been accused of corruption, and that's always something I used to hear about him back when he was president. So he was supposed to submit to a constitutional court for an inquiry on his corruption allegations. He refused to submit. For that reason, the constitutional court sentenced him to 2 years inside of jail. He is 79 years old. So whenever he was actually turned into the jail, basically his supporters went nuts. Now, it started with his supporters. And there's from talking with some people on the ground, like, there's some tribal elements, as far as, his supporters also being people from his tribe, and there might be some type of intertribal, like, issues there. But essentially from there, like, it's really grown to, I think, a movement all over South Africa. If you don't know, South Africa is the most unequal country in the world. You have about 80% of the population that's Black, more than 80%, I believe, and they own less than 10% of the land. Whereas farmers who are white farmers, who are about 8% of the population, own like something like 80% of the land. Very, very, very unequal. And this is not the only issue of settler colonialism. There's been others, but this one is just like the most stark example. So I think a lot of people were expecting this type of thing to happen over time, because you can't keep having people confined inside of ghettos. I mean, think about wherever you are in the African diaspora or on the continent, you've probably experienced over time, you keep confining people in bad conditions, then it's only a matter of time before everything explodes. South Africa also has a very real history of having these types of protests and explosions against the system. And it's really, to me, a symbol of the powerlessness that you feel. Like, you're told that you live in an equal society. You're told you live in the best country in Africa, the most rich country in Africa. That's what they tell you, but you have no real benefit from being a citizen of that country. So I also think it's very interesting, though, that the media is more trying to focus on Cuba's protests and not focus on South Africa's, which is obviously, we know why, because the American media very much is against the sovereignty of Cuba. But yeah, so this is what's happening. And also, we should also keep in mind that they don't want to promote African people rebelling against the white supremacist system. And a lot of ways, this is what's happening when you look at people just burning down stuff and looting and everything like that. Because we all have this experience, globally, as far as African people, we've all been dealing with this system in some way or the other. So it's just interesting. It's one of those things we expected, and definitely watching to see what happens. I don't think it's a sustainable protest because it was spontaneous and, driven by Jacob Zuma rather than driven by the people being in an organized fashion and addressing their issues. But regardless, we should still stand in solidarity for the people and take this as a sign that we need to quickly organize, because things are only getting worse, and things like this will only become more frequent. And if we can create institutions to face the racist system, then these demonstrations will be more targeted towards the actual problem.
Yeah, I think it's. I'm glad you had raised a lot of the points that you made, because even when you were talking about the land, right, made me think about Malcolm X. Said land is the basis of independence, right? And so, as we can see, according to what you just laid out, white people are in control of the vast amount of land in South Africa. So, despite this, the ANC being the political regime that's in power, we got to look at like who's in control of the resources, who's in control of the land. Those are the people who are going to have influence on the politics of that country. And going back to also the numbers, I was looking at something that said more than half the country is living in poverty. So it's crazy when you have white minority of white people controlling all of this land. And the indigenous people of that land are living impoverished. So that's the contradiction in itself, because many people, when we talk about colonialism, many people have this picture of this European, this white, Oppenheimer-looking person, De Beers-looking person. But it's what we have there is like white power and blackface through the ANC, those people who are in power right now. So, that's a contradiction that needs to change. And I think when we go into this reading, we'll see like this distinction too between colonialism and neocolonialism. So we understand what that looks like today. I don't know, Frank, you wanted to add anything?
Let me just add a quick comment that I think one of the great revolutionary pan-African that we have, Walter Ronin, he also mentioned that in his book that whenever the imperialist sees that the African masses are rising up against them and it's going to affect the pockets of the imperialists, they always come out with an idea to change our focus or our mindset, and then put our focus elsewhere. And then while we are focusing on that, they are on the other side, quickly doing what they need to do. And he described that in his book. That is a typical example. I listened to one of the I think the deputy minister for the EFF, Flor Shimbavu. I listened to him about this whole case in South Africa, and he said this guy was not tried the right way, and they did not even go by the Constitution. They went against the Constitution and then tried this guy and then judging. So he said the ANC is the cause of this whole thing going on here. If they were to go according to the Constitution, this was not going to happen. But they went ahead, took matter into their own hand, and they did not go with the Constitution. Now, and you can see that the reason to this is that very soon election will be coming up. Very, very soon election will be coming up. And the ANC, or the white supremacy in Africa, the few minority that controls South Africa, they are saying that the EFF is rising up and they are recruiting. And not just even say EFF, but African are rising up on a daily basis, demanding for every aspect of South Africa that belonging to them, that they want to claim it. So what happened here is to get the attention of South African, of Black South African, if I can put it that way, into another direction. And then while they are focusing on this, and then this will create another scenario that they will focus on, try to resolve it or try to solve it while they are doing this until time comes for election and whatsoever. So could this be, I'm not saying that it was the wrong thing to try this guy or to judge him for the crime he committed and thing, but the manner in which it was done, he said was not the right way, and they did not go by the Constitution. So either there was a honor, foul play or something that went on here, or some calculated plan that went on here, or so forth.
If I could just add something in, if my son will let me, one of the comments said, how do Africans allow white people to control land in 2021? The same way that Africans everywhere, we're not in control of ourselves. It's because we lack organization. And once we have organization, we'll be able to confront these institutions. We have to keep in mind colonialism and enslavement and things like that. It wasn't just individual acts. It was a systemic effort of people coming together for the purpose of oppressing us. And so when we say we have to be in organizations, we're saying that the only way that we're going to be able to undo things like the land crisis in South Africa is when you have the people come together in a way that's going to be a collective threat to the same system that's depriving them of land. So right now, these are demonstrations, and they're definitely worrisome to the white power structure. But what they're really worried about is having this Black majority, 80%, come together in an organized fashion and force the issue of land and tell the system, you have to do this or else, by any means necessary. If you'll do it by laws, fine. But if you won't do it by laws, we'll take it. Those are the things that the system is afraid of. So the answer is the same reason why Africans in America are still powerless, and Africans in in Jamaica, Africans in Europe, wherever we are, is because we're not organized.
Yeah, and let me just add to that quick to that question. Okay, we can say they are the minority that own and invest that almost all the land. That is a fact. But the issue here is they are organized, they are united. In a sense that we are not organized, we are not united. And now they are also organized and united, and they have the capital, right? So during slavery, during colonial time, all the capital, all the resources, all the wealth, they control it, they have it. So it made them rich. And then adding to that, they feed you, they bring in the money and things. So in other words, if some of your so-called leaders try to back off from them, they put sanction on them, right? And then they don't give them IMF, or they don't give them a bank note or whatsoever, and those things. So that's the reason why they are so strong in what they are doing. And so when we say Black people or African people should come together, organize, we are not just saying to organize and just come together and discuss, but to organize and fight collectively. That's what we mean when we say organize, come together, organize and fight collectively and win together as one people. And that is their fear. And we all know that. So why can't we organize and come together and fight collectively?
Yeah, indeed. That sounded like a call for membership right there, man. Definitely. So we can transition and to the last of our weekly roundup. But also just a quick point too, like understanding, just going back to what Tierney was talking about, and Frank, you laid out some things too. But just we have to understand, like, the system that was developed, colonial capitalism, has been created over the last 600 years, established by the colonial powers, these European powers, and they are the overseers of the system. And so, any sort of attack on this system that has been designed is going to be met with force. Like, they strategically put people in place so they can sustain this system. And so, what part of the problem is neocolonialism, having these puppets that's in power, that's corrupt, that's keeping this thing going. That's why I appreciate this reading we're going to do today, because it's really going to get into that. But I think like that answers the question of like how come it's been so difficult for us to like really overturn this system, because a lot of the people who are from our communities and positions of power, they are going along with the system. They legitimize the system, thinking that they can reform it by working within the system. So the next story that I'm going to cover is actually, I was watching the BBC reel, the truth behind segregated neighborhoods in the United States. For the sake of time, I'm just going to touch on some points and be really brief. But it's an extract from this documentary called The Black American Fight for Freedom. And so it touches on a court case in 1970. The court case is Milliken versus Bradley. And so the NAACP has sued the state of Michigan to desegregate Detroit. And so the reel is just talking about how housing segregation is connected or related to segregation that happens in the school system, within the school system. And so this court case was suing to show that the government was working, that was the government purposely was working to keep schools desegregated, and also to keep housing segregated. I'm sorry, did I say desegregated? To keep these things segregated in the 1970s. So in the real, it talks about this Judge Stephen Roth, who agreed with the plaintiffs that the government was working to keep to housing in the schools segregated. But what they didn't explain in the real, but what they probably, I haven't seen the documentary. They may go into the documentary more about this case. But I did further research, and in 1974, the Supreme Court actually overturned the 1970 decision and they ruled in 1974 that there's no evidence that the government has been enforcing segregation. But when you go back to the 1970 case, though, there was testimony of redlining that was taking place, which is, when these banks sort of draw a red line around districts or communities that are predominantly, Black or people of Latino, people that are Latino, and saying that these are high risk areas, or high risk areas. So they will not give housing loans to people that live in these communities. Also, there was evidence of exclusionary zoning that was taking place, and this is when there's restrictions on the type of homes that can be built in a particular neighborhood, and so they would change zoning designations from residential to industrial if these communities became predominantly Black. That was just one thing that they would do. And of course, like, there were other means that they would do to keep neighborhoods segregated. So last point I want to make, because for the sake of time, is that what the article I read pointed out was how the government, how they would redraw the boundaries for congressional districts. Like, they'll do something like that. So the government will do things that they'll see will be in the interest of the public when it comes to redrawing boundaries. But when they came to redrawing boundaries to bring about some sort of equity in education, that they said that it was unconstitutional and so forth. So, I mean, I'm under my thing is that I think that we should be educating ourselves anyway. It's not about us trying to integrate into these school systems, but I think, like, this does expose the complicity of the government to keep us keep our communities underdeveloped, to keep our children underdeveloped and so forth. So no, just having the knowledge of this, I think it just shows that the only answer is for us to just focus on building our communities, wherever African people are, and not necessarily trying to integrate within this burning house, as Dr. King once said.
Yeah, I know over time, I'll just make a quick statement that you'll realize as you study things like Ikemba was laid out and read certain books, like I think Color of Law is the word. The ghettos that we see, they weren't something that just happened. They were created by the government. And that's something that I think people don't recognize. We put a lot of blame on ourselves, but it was literally the government that created the ghettos that we live in today. So I'll just say
that. Did you want to add anything, Frank, before we transition?
No, we can transition. We can transition right now.
All right. So we're 4 minutes over, but it's all good. We, like I said, we got a great read today. We're going to be reading Kwame Nkrumah. We're starting at the introduction. We're reading Class Struggle.
Wait, I have a request.
Oh, yes.
I feel like, it'd be cool, like, if we kind of give, like, a small background on the people. Like, Kwame Nkrumah is such a huge person, so some people might not have heard of him.
Go ahead. You gonna go for it?
All right, so, Kwame Nkrumah probably is one of the top most important Pan-Africanists in history. And we call him Osajifo Kwame Nkrumah because he wasn't just, a person, but he was very beloved. And he was the first president of Ghana. He was a revolutionary. led the Ghana to independence. And then from there, where we all talk about having a united Africa, he was the one that really championed that. He tried to have the Organization of African Unity, which became the African Union. That was going to be a united Africa. However, there were some Western segments of the organization that wanted to keep the African Union weak, which is what we see today. But he's the one that championed that. He's the one that championed so many things. So if you don't know Kwame Nkrumah, you should look into him.
Hey, appreciate that. Yeah. Self-critical for that. Yeah, moving forward, I'm gonna make sure that because we're reading some powerful figures in our history. And we should know some background of the people that we're reading. I also want to encourage everybody to visit our website, wechargecolonialism.org. And if you're not a member, definitely become a member today. Ask yourself, how you can get involved in this fight for liberation. It's not just a national struggle, it's an international struggle that we want to be involved in. And so you can email us at info@wechargecolonialism.org. Email us and find out how you can get involved in the fight. So we can get started. Like I said, we're going to start with the introduction. All right. In Africa, where so many different kinds of political, social, and economic conditions exist, it is not an easy task to generalize on political and social economic patterns. Remnants of communalism and feudalism still remain, and in parts of the continent, ways of life have changed very little from traditional times. In other areas, a high level of industrialization and urbanization has been achieved. Yet, in spite of Africa's social, economic, and political diversity, it is possible to discern certain common political, social, and economic conditions and problems. These derive from traditional past common aspirations and from shared experience under imperialism, colonialism, and neocolonialism. There is no part of the continent which has not known oppression and exploitation, and no part which remains outside the process of the African Revolution. Everywhere, the underlying unity of purpose of the peoples of Africa is becoming increasingly evident, and no African leader can survive who does not pay at least lip service to the African revolutionary objectives of total liberation, unification, and socialism. In this situation, the ground is well prepared for the next crucial phase of the revolution, when the armed struggle, which has now emerged, must be intensified, expanded, and effectively coordinated at strategic and tactical levels. And at the same time, a determined attack must be made on the entrenched position of the minority reactionary elements amongst our own peoples. For the dramatic exposure in recent years of the nature and extent of the class struggle in Africa through the succession of reactionary military coups and the outbreak of civil wars, particularly in West and Central Africa, has demonstrated the unity between the interests of neocolonialism and the indigenous bourgeoisie. And though this was written, actually, I don't know the exact year, but I'm assuming it was written in the 60s, though. Wish I had that information. But this was definitely written a few decades ago. And so, I guess I'm stopping because it's just like, it's really also explaining what we see today with this relationship between the system of neocolonialism and the indigenous bourgeoisie, who represent the neocolonialists. And so, and I think like our people should understand, like when we talk about neocolonialism, I mean, it is colonialism. It's colonialism, but it just has a different face and strategic positions than we're used to seeing. Like the white person is indirect rule, I guess you can say, rather than direct rule over the African population. You wanted to add something, Ted? I see.
It was made in 1972.
Okay.
Yeah, I just looked it up when you were talking. And yeah, I think we're going to see that as with all of. Okay, I gotta walk in 1 second.
Okay. So while she's coming back, let me just add to the reading. So he also mentioned something like coup d'etat and all of those things that took place on the African continent when African leaders and revolutionaries were fighting for independent Africa. And like Tiani said, this guy was one of the leading force of independent Africa in general, because he said, the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless all African nations, are free. That even means you can have all 54 nations in Africa free, but if one is still colonized, Africa is not free. So now, what am I saying here? You also mentioned that, coup d'etat and all of those things that took place. So the neo-colonialism, the new form now these days is that if they can't do coup d'etat, because they are also getting to know that coup d'etat, is getting, out of the way now. Like, people don't want to see it. Africans don't want to be part of it, like how Africans were part of the assassination of Thomas Sankara, Patrice Lumumba, and other great revolutionary leader like Amilcar Cabral and all of those things. Now, the new form that they are coming with now is creating terrorist organization. We see that right now in Boko Haram. I mean, Africans are not the ones supporting these people. Africans are not the one producing these or weapons or foreign ammunition and things. They are all foreign weapons that are being carried on the continent. They are the one creating these how to call it fashion, these Boko Haram axes how you call it in Africa. I don't even know them. They are the one creating it, right? So they are the one creating those people. They are the one funding those people to destabilize these African countries, to destabilize black nations and things. So that is why he also talking about neo-colonialism, because you also have blackface on there, fighting on behalf of white people, fighting on behalf of white supremacy. So these are some of the things he's also talking about on the how they call it in the book here.
Yeah.
You guys covered it. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, like, just going to this point of neo-colonialism, this is why racism is only part of the problem, because sometimes we can be deluded into thinking that, it's only white people in positions of power who are causing the suffering and the misery that we see vast amount of Africans subjected to. But we have people who look just like us in positions of power who are working in the interests of these European powers and working against the interests of the African working class. So just wanted to raise that point. So at the core of the problem is the class struggle. For too long, social and political commentators have talked and written as though Africa lies outside the mainstream of world historical development, a separate entity to which the social, economic, and political patterns of the world do not apply. Myths such as African socialism and pragmatic socialism, implying the existence of a brand or brands of socialism applicable to Africa alone, have been propagated, and much of our history has been written in terms of socio-anthropological and historical theories, as though Africa had no history prior to the colonial period. One of these distortions has been the suggestion that the class structures which exist in other parts of the world do not exist in Africa. Nothing is further from the truth. A fierce class struggle has been raging in Africa. The evidence is all around us. In essence, it is, as in the rest of the world, a struggle between the oppressors and the oppressed. The African Revolution is an integral part of the world socialist revolution, and just as the class struggle is basic to world revolutionary processes, so also is it fundamental to the struggle of the workers and peasants of Africa. Class divisions in modern African society became blurred to some extent during the pre-independence period, when it seemed there was national unity and all classes joined forces to eject the colonial power. This led some to proclaim that there was no class divisions in Africa, and that the communalism and egalitarianism of traditional African society made any notion of a class struggle out of the question. But the exposure of this fallacy followed quickly after independence, when class cleavages, which had been temporarily submerged in the struggle to win political freedom, reappeared, often with increased intensity, particularly in those states where the newly independent government embarked on socialist policies. For the African bourgeoisie, the class which thrived under colonialism is the same class which is benefiting under the post-independence neo-colonial period. Its basic interest lies in preserving capitalist, social, and economic structures. It is therefore in alliance with international monopoly, finance, capital. I think this is also a great point because sometimes what happens, especially like with the cultural nationalists, they tend to romanticize Africa before the colonial period, where as if there weren't any contradictions that existed. And I think like it's important to raise that these class struggles existed way before Europeans came on the scene, and that way we can deal with the struggles that we have or the contradictions that we have within our society and within our communities today, um, um, in a practical way, I think. But yeah, I don't know if any y'all wanted to add anything.
Yeah, let me just add to it. He gave a very clear explanation of the book about African history, that if we say Africa have not contributed or Africa have no history, in those things. So this is what I want to say here. We all know for now it is clear. Western media, they're not going to say anything positive about Africa or anything positive about African people, how African people have lived, and their contribution to the war even before the 1600 and other those things. Well, Greek scientists and that travel to Africa and when they learn, even up to today, contemporary scientists actually travel to Africa for studies and those things. So they're not even talking about none of those things, right? Now, we clearly know that they are not going to put themselves in a position to talk about it, because they're going to give a clear understanding or perspective of the involvement and of African people into the war. So we know that for sure clear. Let me see. There was something I was looking at it here, just kind of slipped from my mind. But anyway, you can go ahead. If I get it back, I will come back. I wanted to say something before connecting it, but it just slipped up.
Yeah, and I like the point you made, Ikemba, about the romanticizing of Africa. Unfortunately, because we've been taught so much to hate Africa, some of us go over and beyond to pretend like our homeland had no problems. There's problems in every society. That's a natural occurrence with human beings. Human beings are not perfect. So obviously, if human beings are not perfect, whenever they come together and form communities, form societies, there's always going to be problems. I think what Africa differs inside of other societies is that, particularly like the after the industrial period societies, like England and all those places that experienced the Industrial Revolution, is that we were motivated overwhelmingly, I think, about a common good. But even inside of that formation, you do have people who, like I said, people are not perfect. You're always going to have people who try to enforce governance systems that are not beneficial to the collective, in which way we deal with those people. So that's what class struggle is. Whenever someone rises up and says, we want to make sure that my interests are put forth above everyone else's interests, the people rise up against that and put them back in their place. So we should understand that. And also there was a point that he made about African socialism. If you don't know, like, Julius Nyerere, he wrote a book, Ujima, African Socialism, and Nkrumah was critical of Nyerere because he felt like creating an African socialism, one, was not necessary because Africans historically were socialists. If you look at communal societies, communalism is essentially socialism, but inside of an agrarian society, whereas socialism is inside of an industrial society. But two, because he felt like there was no need to Africanize something, that there are universal principles that can be applied, whether you are someone who is of African descent or someone of a different descent. One thing I think he will go into, I believe it's this book though, is that the history of class struggle in Africa and Europe really do differ. And that's where you see a need to differentiate ourselves from Europeans and what they, how they describe the system, whether it's socialism or capitalism.
Yeah, so let me add to the point I wanted to make. Like, it just came back, and so getting to the end of Tianin, what she said, I was able to get what I missed. So the issue here is one of the things that he also mentioned in this book, that the neo-colonialists will try as much as possible to get our attention away. One thing that we have come to understand, and we African, we always listen to the narrative of the imperialists, of the neo-colonialists that they bring to us. We don't take our own narrative. They always says one of the problem of Africa is how they call it tribalism, is because they have so many dialects, they have so many languages and all of those things. That is not a problem. The problem is not because we have dialects. The problem is not because we speak so many dialects. We speak 400 or 500 dialects or tribes in Africa. That is not a problem. Because if they say that is a problem, then the issue here is, do you know how many tribes in the United States here? They have so many diversity, so many ethnicities in the United States here. But what happened? The state fought hard to create a narrative, to create a story, to unite the people. So it is the same way we African, we need to sit back and relax and really reflect and think and say, no, if the United States or if the Western media are saying this is the cause of Africa, being impoverished or poverty or suffering and all of those things, then why they also have so many ethnicities in the United States or even in Europe and all of those things? I think the issue here is they bring some of these things to us so that we can throw away our culture, because by we having so many languages and dialects and things, that is what make our culture unique. That is what make Africa so dynamic and so important and so relevant to the world, because we have so many dialects and things. You can learn other dialects if you don't want to learn this and still be able to communicate. So when they say these things to us, what they're trying to tell us here is to forget our culture, to learn their English, to learn their German, to learn their French and all of those things. And once we do that, we don't see ourselves as African. We see ourselves as European, and we want to be part of them. And this is how they continue to defeat us. I think what we need to do is that, okay, if we believe that by speaking so many languages of tribe is the problem, why not we find a specific language, a specific tribe in Africa that we all can learn, instead of us speaking English as our major language, instead of us speaking French as our major language, instead of us speaking Portuguese as our major language, instead of us speaking German as our major language. We can still find a language in Africa and make it a one common language that will unite the African people around the world. And despite doing that, that doesn't mean we should let go the other tribes. We can still learn them. Those who want to learn it, they learn it. But we have a central, how they call it, a language in Africa that we take from the African continent, that we can learn it and speak it and communicate. And that can even unite us. Then somebody speaking French, somebody speaking German, somebody speaking Portuguese. It cannot unite us. It will never unite us.
Indeed. Thanks for laying that out. I want to quickly go to this chart that's on the next page. As you can see, colonialism. You have colonialism and neo-colonialism, and who are the privileged classes in and under those systems, and who are the oppressed classes. And so you have the privileged classes being the bureaucratic bourgeoisie, officers of armed forces and police, intelligentsia, professional class, and the compradors, etc. The oppressed classes being the workers, the peasants, small farmers, and traders. So yeah, I'm going to move to the next page. I think we got a few more minutes, so I'm gonna try to get through another. Yeah. All right. And neo-colonialism, and I feel like I'm stopped off on the sentence, but in neo-colonialism and in direct conflict with the African masses whose aspirations can only be fulfilled through scientific socialism. Although the African bourgeoisie is small numerically and lacks the financial and political strength of its counterparts in the highly industrialized countries, it gives the illusion of being economically strong because it is close tie up with foreign financial capital and business interests. Many members of the African bourgeoisie are employed by foreign firms and have therefore a direct financial stake in the continuance of the foreign economic exploitation of Africa. Others, notably in the civil service, trading and mining firms, the armed forces, the police, and in the professions are committed to capitalism because of their background, their Western education, and their shared experience and enjoyment of positions of privilege. They are mesmerized by capitalist institutions and organizations. They ape the way of life of their old colonial masters and are determined to preserve the status and power inherited from them. Yeah, so because sake of time, I think we can get some final thoughts on this because this is another important. Talking about the neo-colonialists, the black power, white power, and black face right here. This is what we're dealing with in our communities, and I think it goes back to the education too. If you do a history on the establishment of educational institutions in our communities on the continent and also in the diaspora, that has been directed by the colonial powers, they are educating us to become their colonial puppets at the end of the day. And so once you go through this education system, it's this proximity to whiteness you're able to attain by your diction, the way that you speak, the way that you think, and so forth, the way that you dress, behave. It separates you from the uneducated within colonial society, and it offers you more opportunities to be able to climb up the social ladder under colonial capitalism. But this is something that we shouldn't be striving for. At the end of the day, like, we're for the liberation of African people. And so we have to revolutionize this system, not necessarily the other option, which is to become a part of it.
And I really love the part where he said we're basically mesmerized by capitalism, because a lot of us are, we're trying to, without having a truthful assessment on which ways the system has done us wrong versus the ways that if there are benefits to it, people just, I think, are mesmerized by people like Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg and like those people, and we're just shown constantly their images of these people and sold this idea that you could have all these huge mansions and all these things, and we're not really critical of the backdrop, like the people who are exploited to create that system, the people who don't get to have that reality. So it's a very truthful thing, I think, for us to understand that we have to have a truthful assessment of which ways capitalism or socialism have or could help the most African people instead of only helping a few.
Yeah, just to add to that quick, how they call it, capitalism, colonialism also, as he described, also gave birth to neo-colonialism. Now, one of the things I also get from this chapter, where he talked about neo-colonialism, and we also explained that by saying we also have black faces, on the page of neo-colonialism, right? So now, what I also got from this book is that even there are some white people who will say, "Oh, I did not colonize you. That was my forefather. I wasn't even born at that time." But yeah, and this is what Nkrumah was talking about neo-colonialism. You wasn't born at that time, but the system that was created at that time that you was not born, you as a white man, you are still holding on to that system, empowering yourself and benefiting from it. So indeed, you are part of it. Because that system that was created that you were not born by your forefather, you are still carrying on the legacy of your forefather by holding on to those racist policies, holding on to those policies that how they call it, keep oppressing black people. Now, if a black man want to come out to speak for the ill your people were done in society, and which of course you are still carrying on, that person become a threat to you. So that is neo-colonialism. Nkrumah also described in this book as well.
Indeed. Thank you for those final remarks. And we always on revolutionary time. We start on time, end on time. I want to appreciate everybody. Oh, go ahead.
Frank has an announcement. Sorry.
Yeah. Did you have an announcement?
Frank, the revolutionary repatriation class on Wednesday.
Oh yeah, I think it's Wednesday, right? This coming Wednesday.
Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern time on Clubhouse.
Yeah, 8 p.m. Oh, yeah. Did we say 8 p.m. or 9 p.m.?
8 p.m.
Okay, 8 p.m. So Wednesday, 8 p.m. We are going to be coming back with our second podcast on the Revolutionary Repatriation Education Forum back to Africa that we started last week, which went great. So it's going to be Eastern time, 8 p.m. So we hope you guys join us as we discuss, as we educate and the African continent, and as we give knowledge and perspective about African people general around the world, and some of the things that is happening, on the African continent right now that we call the scramble, for Africa, and the modern propaganda that is going on. So we are here to give you the right news and the right direction, the right frame of mind to follow and not to listen to these Western propaganda as well. So this is the time, like Nkrumah said, neocolonialism is the last stage. And it can only be the last stage if we take, African people take matter into their own hand and stop following the white supremacy, or stop following neocolonial and policies, or stop being bourgeoisie. If indeed it is the last stage, it is up to us to take matter into our own hands.
And the subject will be China and Africa, good, bad, or it depends.
Yes.
Indeed,
Yes.
indeed. I will be there. So I want to appreciate everybody for tuning in, and we will be back here next Saturday at 10 a.m. As usual, to discuss more topics, to continue with this read, Class Struggle by Kwame Nkrumah. And again, make sure you visit our website. And if you haven't joined already, email us info@wechargecolonialism.org and be a part of the process, the building process. Remember, strength is in numbers. We need all your skills, talents, and so forth. So until next week, it's peace.